Commander Zixthor stood on the bridge of his warship, watching the planet below burn. The fires spread across the surface like a disease, consuming everything in their path. Another world lost. Another billion souls who would never see tomorrow. He closed his 3 eyes and tried not to think about the families down there. The children who were crying out for help that would never come. The Krethic had won again. His communications officer made a sound that was close to a sob. Zixthor understood. They had all lost someone in this war. 3 years of constant fighting had drained them of everything. Ships, soldiers, hope. The Valorian coalition fleet was down to less than 40 vessels, and most of those were barely holding together. Repair crews worked day and night just to keep the engines running. Across the viewing screen, the Krethic fleet hung in space like vultures. There were so many of them. Red hulls covered in weapons, each ship designed for one purpose only: destruction. The Krethic loved war. They lived for it. Their entire culture was built around conquest and domination. And now they had set their sights on the Valorian coalition. 12 star systems had already fallen. 12 homes for trillions of people, now under Krethic control. The survivors were slaves forced to work in mines or factories. Those who resisted were killed. It was simple and brutal. Just like everything else about the Krethic, Zixthor's tactical officer approached him. Her name was difficult to pronounce in human terms, but it meant something like hope in her language. How ironic, he thought. There was precious little hope left. "Commander, we're receiving a message from High Command," she said. Her voice was tired. Everyone was tired. "Put it through," Zixthor replied. The face of High Counselor Vexnor appeared on the screen. He looked older than Zixthor remembered. The war had aged them all. The counselor's skin had lost its color, and his movements were slow and deliberate. "Commander Zixthor, I wish I had better news," Vexnor began. "The defense of Valorian Prime cannot hold much longer. The Krethic are gathering their forces for a final assault. Our projections show we have less than 2 weeks before they attack." Zixthor felt his heart sink. Valorian Prime was their homeworld. If it fell, the coalition would cease to exist. Everything they had fought for would be lost. "What are our options, High Counselor?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Vexnor was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weight that Zixthor had never heard before. "The Council has made a decision. We are going to send a distress signal to Earth." The bridge went silent. Every officer stopped what they were doing and turned to look at the screen. Earth. The humans. Everyone in the galaxy knew about them, though few had actually met them. Humans were new to space travel. They had only developed faster-than-light technology 5 years ago. The galactic community had granted them provisional membership, mostly as a courtesy. Their technology was primitive compared to most species. Their weapons were basic. Their ships were simple designs that any engineer could build. "High Counselor," Zixthor said carefully, "with all respect, what can the humans do? They have no experience with galactic warfare. Their fleet is small. They barely have 50 ships capable of long-range travel." "I know," Vexnor said. "Believe me, I know. But we have no other choice. Every other species in the community is either too far away, too weak, or unwilling to help. The humans are our last hope." There was that word again. Hope. Zixthor wondered if it meant anything anymore. "The Council believes the humans might help us," Vexnor continued. "They have a strange sense of honor. When we granted them membership, they were grateful. They spoke of debts and obligations. Perhaps they will remember that now." Zixthor wanted to argue. He wanted to say that gratitude meant nothing in war, that 50 human ships would be destroyed in minutes against the Krethic Armada, that sending a distress signal to Earth was just giving false hope to people who had none left. But he said nothing. What else could they do? "The signal has already been sent," Vexnor said. "Now we wait, and we pray that the humans are more than they appear to be." The communication ended, and Zixthor was left staring at the empty screen. Around him, his crew returned to their duties, but he could feel their doubt. They had all heard the stories about humans. A species that spent most of its history fighting among themselves. A people divided by countries, religions, languages. They had only united recently, and even then the peace was fragile. What could such a species offer against the Krethic? His tactical officer approached again. "Commander, what should we tell the fleet?" Zixthor thought for a long moment. "Tell them that help is coming. Tell them to hold on just a little longer." "Do you believe that, Commander?" He looked at her, at the exhaustion in her eyes, at the way her hands shook slightly from stress and lack of sleep. "I have to," he said quietly. The next few days passed slowly. The Krethik continued their advance, taking systems one by one. The Valorian fleet retreated again and again, always falling back, always losing ground. Every battle cost them ships they couldn't replace, soldiers they couldn't spare. On the fifth day, long-range sensors picked up something unusual. A large group of ships had just entered the sector, coming from the direction of Earth's solar system. At first, the sensor operators thought it was a mistake. The readings showed 50 vessels, all moving in perfect formation, all traveling at speeds that shouldn't be possible for human technology. Zixthor studied the data carefully. 50 ships. That matched Earth's entire deep space fleet. They had sent everything. Analysis, he asked his science officer. "The ships are definitely human in design," the officer replied, "but there's something strange about their energy signatures. They're much stronger than our records indicate. Either our intelligence was wrong, or the humans have made significant advances in the past 5 years. How long until they reach our position? At their current speed, approximately 18 hours. 18 hours. Zixthor wondered what would happen when those ships arrived. Would they fight? Would they run? Would they even make a difference? He thought about Earth, about the humans he had met during the membership ceremony. They were strange creatures. Only 2 eyes, no natural armor, physically weak compared to most species. But there was something in the way they carried themselves, something in their eyes that suggested hidden depths. Their ambassador had given a speech that day. Zixthor remembered it now. The human had talked about duty and sacrifice, about standing up for those who couldn't stand for themselves. At the time, it had seemed like empty words, the kind of thing politicians always said. Now, watching those 50 ships racing toward a war zone, Zixthor wondered if maybe, just maybe, the humans had meant every word. His communications officer interrupted his thoughts. "Commander, we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet." "Let's hear it." The voice that came through the speakers was calm and steady. It spoke in perfect Valorian, translated by some kind of computer system. "This is Admiral Kyle Henderson of the United Earth Space Forces, commanding the relief fleet. We received your distress call. We're coming to help. Hold your position. We'll be there soon." The message was short and simple. No grand speeches. No promises they might not be able to keep. Just a statement of fact. "We're coming. Hold on." Around the bridge, Zixthor saw something he hadn't seen in months. His crew was smiling. Some were even laughing, though whether from relief or disbelief he couldn't tell. "Send a response," Zixthor ordered. "Tell them we're grateful for their assistance. Transmit all tactical data on Krethik forces and positions." "Yes, Commander." As the data was sent, Zixthor pulled up information on Admiral Henderson. The human was in his late 50s, which was young by galactic standards but apparently experienced for humans. He had fought in something called the Unification Wars, conflicts that had brought Earth's nations together. His record showed dozens of battles, all victories, but those were wars against other humans. The Krethik were different. They were stronger, faster, more experienced in space combat. They had been conquering worlds while humans were still learning to walk upright. Zixthor pushed those thoughts away. Doubt wouldn't help anyone now. The humans were coming and they would fight. That was more than anyone else in the galaxy had offered. He looked at the countdown timer on his screen. 17 hours and 43 minutes until the human fleet arrived. He wondered if that would be enough time. He wondered if anything would be enough against the Krethik. But deep inside, in a place he thought had died long ago, Zixthor felt. Admiral Kyle Henderson was drinking coffee when the alert came through. It was 3 a.m. at Earth Defense Command, and he had been reviewing supply reports for the past 6 hours. Not exciting work, but necessary. Someone had to make sure the fleet had enough fuel and ammunition. The alert made every screen in his office turn red. Priority 1 message from Deep Space Monitoring. Henderson set down his coffee and opened the transmission. It was a distress call. The Valorian coalition was under attack and facing extinction. They were requesting immediate military assistance from Earth. The message included tactical data showing the size of the enemy force and current casualty estimates. Henderson read through it twice, making sure he understood everything correctly. Then he picked up his phone and called the president. "Sir, we have a situation." 30 minutes later, Henderson was standing in the White House Situation Room. President Brandon Hayes sat at the head of the table, looking at the same data Henderson had reviewed. Around them sat the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Secretary of Defense, and representatives from every branch of Earth's military. "How bad is it?" Hayes asked. "As bad as it gets, Mr. President," Henderson replied. "The Valorians are down to their last few ships. If we don't help them, they'll be wiped out within 2 weeks." General Linda Shaw, head of the Space Marines, spoke up. "What do we know about this enemy?" "The Krethik?" Henderson brought up a holographic display showing a Krethik warrior. The creature stood over 7 feet tall, covered in thick armor plating that grew naturally from its body. Its forearms ended in claws sharp enough to cut through steel. "They're a warrior species," Henderson explained. "Everything in their culture revolves around combat and conquest. They've been expanding their territory for the past decade, and now they've targeted the Valorian coalition." "What about their military capabilities?" asked Captain Lauren Price, commander of the carrier UES Thunderchief. "Significant," Henderson said. "They have over 200 warships in the Epsilon sector. Their weapons are primarily plasma-based, effective against most shielding systems. Their tactics favor overwhelming force and direct assault." Captain Price studied the data carefully. She had short red hair and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. "Their formation patterns are predictable. They don't use much in the way of tactical maneuvering." "Most galactic species don't," added Commander Jake Morrison. He was the youngest officer in the room, barely 30, but his record in electronic warfare was impressive. "From what our scouts have reported, most alien species fight in very traditional ways. Honor-bound tactics, predictable patterns." President Hayes leaned back in his chair. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly. The Valorians helped us when we were new to space. They vouched for us in the galactic community. Now they're asking for help, and we're the only ones who answered." "That's correct, sir," Henderson confirmed. "Then the choice is simple," Hayes said. "We help them. The question is how." Henderson had been waiting for this. He pulled up a different display, showing Earth's entire deep space fleet. 50 warships of various types, carriers, destroyers, cruisers, and one experimental dreadnought that had just completed its trials. "We send everything," Henderson said. The room went quiet. General Shaw was the first to speak. "Everything? That leaves Earth completely undefended. With respect, General, if we don't stop the Krethik now, Earth will be next," Henderson replied. "They're expanding in this direction. Better to fight them 2 sectors away than in our own backyard." Hayes looked around the table. "Opinions?" Captain Marcus Flynn, commander of the experimental dreadnought UES Retribution, spoke up. He was older than most of the officers, with gray hair and scars from the Unification Wars. "I say we go. The Retribution's weapon systems are designed for exactly this kind of fight. We've been running simulations for months. It's time to see if all that work pays off." One by one, the other officers agreed. This wasn't just about helping the Valorians. This was about showing the galaxy what humanity could do, about proving that Earth deserved its place among the stars. President Hayes made his decision. "Admiral Henderson, you have authorization to deploy the entire fleet. Bring our people home safe and show the Krethik why picking a fight with humanity is a mistake." Henderson saluted. "Yes, Mr. President." The next 48 hours were a controlled chaos. Across Earth, every deep space vessel received orders to prepare for immediate deployment. Crews rushed through final checks. Supply ships loaded ammunition, fuel, and spare parts. Families said hasty goodbyes to loved ones who might not come back. On the UES Defiant, Henderson's flagship, the crew worked without stopping. Lieutenant Katie Warren, the tactical officer, reviewed every piece of intelligence on Krethik battle tactics. She had graduated top of her class at the Space Academy, and now she was putting all that training to use. "Their shield technology is about 20 years behind ours," she reported to Henderson. "Their plasma weapons are powerful, but they travel slowly compared to our railguns, and they don't seem to use electronic warfare at all." "Good," Henderson said. "Make sure every ship in the fleet has this information. I want tactical plans for engaging their formations." In the engine room, Chief Engineer Danny Cole was running diagnostics on every system. He was a big man with hands that looked too large for the delicate work he did, but Henderson had never met a better engineer. "How are we looking, Chief?" Henderson asked over the comm. "All systems green, Admiral," Danny replied. "The new reactor upgrades are performing above expectations. We can sustain maximum speed for the entire journey without any problems. What about weapons? Railguns are calibrated and ready. Missile systems are fully loaded. Point defense is operating at 100%. We're ready for a fight. Henderson smiled. That was exactly what he wanted to hear. On the UES Retribution, Captain Flynn was conducting final tests on the ship's main weapon. The kinetic mass driver was a revolutionary design, capable of firing tungsten slugs at a significant fraction of light speed. Each projectile carried enough energy to punch through a planet, let alone a ship. Lieutenant Eric Nash, Flynn's weapons officer, watched the test results carefully. All systems are ready, Captain. We can fire on your order. Flynn nodded. Good. I want to make our first shot count. Across the fleet, similar preparations were taking place. The UES Thunder Chief launched test flights of its combat drones, making sure the autonomous systems were working correctly. The UES Vengeance ran through electronic warfare drills, practicing how to hack into enemy systems. Every ship, every crew member, every weapon system was being checked and rechecked. Finally, the fleet was ready. 50 ships gathered in formation around Earth, waiting for the order to depart. Henderson stood on the bridge of the Defiant, looking at the blue planet below. Somewhere down there, his daughter was watching the news coverage, wondering if her father would come home. He pushed that thought away. This was what he had trained for his entire life. This was why Earth had built these ships and trained these crews. Not for show, not for exploration, but for moments exactly like this. All ships report ready, Admiral, Katie Warren said. Henderson took a deep breath. Signal the fleet. We're going to war. One by one, the ships activated their faster-than-light drives. Space twisted and bent around them as they entered hyperspace. The fleet moved as one, a unified force heading toward the Epsilon sector. Inside the Defiant, Henderson gathered his senior officers for a final briefing. Katie Warren, Danny Cole, and the other department heads crowded into the conference room. Listen up, Henderson said. We're about to face an enemy that has been conquering worlds since before humans left Africa. They're bigger than us, stronger than us, and they have more ships. They think we're going to be an easy victory. He looked at each officer in turn. We're going to prove them wrong. We're going to show them what humanity can do when we're fighting for something that matters. We're going to save the Valorians, and we're going to send the Krethic running back to whatever hole they crawled out of. Katie Warren spoke up. What if they don't run? Henderson's expression was cold. Then we destroy every single one of their ships. No mercy, no second chances. They started this war. We're going to finish it. The officers nodded. They understood. This wasn't about glory or conquest. This was about protecting innocent people from a threat that would destroy them. This was about doing what was right regardless of the cost. As the briefing ended, Henderson returned to the bridge. Through the viewing screen, he could see the distorted colors of hyperspace flowing past the ship. In 18 hours, they would arrive at the Epsilon sector. In 18 hours, humanity would face its first real test as a galactic power. He thought about the Krethic commander, whoever it was. They would be expecting an easy fight. They would see 50 human ships and assume victory was certain. After all, what could primitive humans possibly do against a proven warrior species? Henderson smiled grimly. They were about to find out. Katie, how long until we arrive? He asked. 17 hours and 56 minutes, Admiral. Good. Make sure every crew member gets some rest. I want everyone sharp when we drop out of hyperspace. Yes, sir. Henderson settled into his command chair and closed his eyes. War Chief Drakthor stood in the command center of his flagship, watching the siege of the last Valorian stronghold. His forearms were crossed in satisfaction. Soon, very soon, the Valorians would fall. Their pathetic resistance would end, and another species would learn to bow before the Krethic dominion. He had 200 warships under his command, the largest fleet ever assembled in this sector. Nothing could stand against such force. The Valorians knew this. That was why they were hiding behind their planetary shields, hoping for a miracle that would never come. War Chief, his sensor operator called out. We're detecting new ships entering the sector. Drakthor turned his massive head. How many? 50 vessels. They're coming from the direction of the human homeworld. The War Chief laughed. It was a deep rumbling sound that made his crew step back nervously. Humans, the galaxy's newest species. Weak creatures with soft skin and no natural weapons. He had seen the reports on them. They were nothing. The humans dare to challenge us? Drakthor said, amused. Perhaps they wish to die alongside the Valorians. How noble. His second-in-command approached. Should we prepare for battle? Send 60 ships to deal with them, Drakthor ordered dismissively. That should be more than enough. The rest will continue the siege. I want this finished by nightfall. The Krethic fleet began to split, with 60 vessels breaking formation and heading toward the approaching human armada. Drakthor watched with interest. This would be entertaining. The humans would see what real warriors looked like, and then they would die. On the bridge of the UES Defiant, Admiral Henderson watched the enemy fleet divide. Exactly as he had hoped. Katie Warren was reading the tactical display, her fingers moving quickly across the controls. 60 Krethic vessels breaking off to engage us, Admiral, she reported. They're maintaining their standard attack formation. Heavy cruisers in front support vessels behind. Their shields, Henderson asked. Active, but the readings confirm they're using older technology. Our weapons should penetrate without difficulty. Henderson stood up from his command chair. This was the moment everything came down to. All the training, all the preparation, all the advancement humanity had made in just 5 years. It was time to see if it was enough. Open a channel to all ships, he ordered. The comm officer nodded. Channel open, Admiral. Henderson took a deep breath. This is Admiral Henderson to all vessels. You've all seen the tactical data. You know what we're up against. The enemy thinks we're weak. They think 50 human ships are no threat to their empire. Let's show them how wrong they are. He paused, looking at the faces of his bridge crew, young men and women who had volunteered to travel across the galaxy to fight for people they had never met. He was proud of every single one of them. Remember your training, trust your equipment, watch each other's backs, and most importantly, show no mercy to those who would harm the innocent. Henderson's voice became hard as steel. Weapons free. Show them what humanity can do. Across the fleet, weapon systems came online. Railguns charged. Missile tubes opened. Energy shields strengthened to maximum power. 50 human warships prepared to face 60 Krethic vessels that had conquered a dozen worlds. The Krethic fleet opened fire first. Bright green plasma bolts streaked through space, each one carrying enough energy to vaporize a city. They struck the human shields and exploded in brilliant flashes of light. On the Defiance bridge, Danny Cole monitored the shield's strength. Shields holding at 98%. Their plasma weapons are no threat. Henderson smiled. Katie, target their lead cruisers. All ships, engage at will. What happened next would be studied by military historians for generations. The human fleet didn't move like the Valorians or any other species the Krethic had fought. They moved like hunters, each ship working in perfect coordination with the others. Advanced AI systems tracked hundreds of targets simultaneously, calculating firing solutions faster than any organic mind could follow. The UES Retribution fired first. Captain Flynn had been waiting for this moment. Fire main weapon, he ordered calmly. The kinetic mass driver unleashed hell. A tungsten slug the size of a car accelerated to incredible speed and crossed the distance to the enemy fleet in less than 2 seconds. It struck a Krethic heavy cruiser directly in the center. The result was devastating. The slug punched through the ship's shields like they weren't even there, tore through the hull and exited out the other side. The cruiser broke apart, its reactor exploding in a ball of white fire. Debris scattered in all directions as the ship died. Target destroyed, Lieutenant Eric Nash reported. Reloading main weapon. But the Retribution wasn't done. Its secondary weapons opened up, railguns firing solid rounds at incredible velocity. Each shot found its target with perfect accuracy. Shields failed. Hulls cracked. Ships died. The UES Thunderchief launched its combat drones. Captain Price had spent months perfecting these autonomous weapons. Now they swarmed forward like angry insects, hundreds of small craft that moved too fast for Krethic weapons to track. They darted around enemy ships, finding weak points in armor and exploiting them with precision strikes. Drones swarm away, Price reported. We're already seeing multiple hits on enemy shields. The UES Vengeance proved that Commander Morrison's reputation for electronic warfare was well-deserved. His team hacked into Krethic communication systems and began sending false orders. Enemy ships suddenly turned on each other, their weapons targeting their own fleet. Confusion spread through the Krethic formation as ships tried to figure out which orders were real. We've got control of their tactical network, Morrison said with satisfaction. They don't even know we're inside their systems. Henderson watched the battle unfold on his tactical display. The human fleet moved through the enemy formation like a knife through paper. Every shot counted. Every missile hit its target. Every tactical decision was perfect. Katie Warren called out targeting information. 3 enemy destroyers on our starboard side. Range 4,000 kilometers. Lock weapons and fire, Henderson ordered. The Defiance railgun spoke. Solid tungsten rounds accelerated down magnetic rails and crossed the distance in heartbeats. The first destroyer's shield collapsed under the impact. The second round punched through its hull. The third round detonated inside the ship, tearing it apart from within. All around the human fleet, Krathic ships were dying. The enemy tried to adapt, tried to change their tactics, but it was too late. The humans had already won. On the Krathic flagship, War Chief Drakthor stared in horror at his displays. In less than 30 seconds, he had lost over 40 ships. 40 ships destroyed by weapons he didn't understand, tactics he had never seen, and an enemy he had dismissed as weak. Status report, he roared. Heavy losses across all battle groups, his sensor operator stammered. The humans are using weapons far beyond our intelligence reports. Their shields are impenetrable. Their accuracy is perfect. We can't match them. Drakthor felt something he had never experienced before in his long military career. Fear. Real, cold fear. Pull back. All ships retreat to the main fleet. But the humans weren't letting them go. Henderson had seen the retreat order. All ships pursue. Don't let them regroup. The human fleet accelerated, their engines far more powerful than the Krathic had expected. They caught the retreating enemy ships and cut them down one by one. Ships that turned to fight were destroyed. Ships that tried to run were hunted down. Captain Flynn's voice came over the fleet channel. This is retribution. I have multiple targets lined up, engaging. The dreadnought's weapons fired again and again. Each shot was a kill. Each kill brought humanity closer to total victory. In 4 minutes, it was over. 70 Krathic warships had been destroyed or disabled. The remaining ships scattered in panic, broadcasting surrender signals that the humans ignored. Henderson had given his orders. No mercy for those who would harm the innocent. The last enemy ship exploded in a flash of light, and suddenly the sector was quiet. Debris floated through space. Emergency beacons from destroyed Krathic vessels cried out for help that wouldn't come. The human fleet held position, their ships barely damaged. On the Defiance bridge, Katie Warren was running diagnostics. Shield strength at 92%. Hull integrity at 100%. All weapon systems nominal. Total casualties across the fleet 0. Henderson nodded slowly. They had done it. 50 human ships had destroyed 70 Krathic vessels in 4 minutes and hadn't lost a single person. The supposedly primitive humans had just delivered the most one-sided victory in modern galactic warfare. Open a channel to the main Krathic fleet, Henderson ordered. War Chief Drakthor's face appeared on the screen. His expression was one of shock and disbelief. I am Admiral Kyle Henderson of the United Earth Space Forces, Henderson said coldly. You have exactly 1 minute to withdraw all of your forces from Valorian space. If you're still here after that, we'll destroy every single one of your ships. Drakthor opened his mouth to speak, perhaps to threaten or to bluster, but Henderson cut him off. Your time starts now. The Krathic war chief looked at his displays, at the wreckage of his battle group, at the 50 human ships that sat in perfect formation without a scratch on them. He knew what would happen if he refused. His fleet would die just like the others had. Commander Zixthor stood on the observation deck of his ship, staring at the debris field that had once been a Krathic battle group. He had seen many battles in his 3 years of war, but nothing like this. Nothing even close to this. 70 enemy warships destroyed in 4 minutes, 0 human casualties. It didn't seem real. It seemed like something from a children's story, where heroes arrived at the last moment and saved everyone with impossible powers. But this was real. The debris was real. The sensor logs were real. The humans had actually done it, Commander, his tactical officer said softly. She had been standing beside him for several minutes, also staring at the destruction. What just happened? Zixthor shook his head. I don't know. The humans. They fought like nothing I've ever seen. Their weapons, their tactics, their technology. Everything was beyond our expectations, but how? They've only been in space for 5 years. We've had space travel for 3,000 years. How can they be so far ahead of us? It was a good question. Zixthor had been wondering the same thing. He pulled up the combat recordings on his personal display and watched them again for the 10th time. The human ships moved with precision that shouldn't be possible. Their weapons hit targets from distances that should be too far for accurate fire. Their shields absorbed plasma blasts that would have destroyed any Valorian vessel. And perhaps most impressive, they worked together like a single organism. No confusion, no hesitation, just perfect coordination, I think, Sixthor said slowly. We made a mistake about humans. We thought they were primitive because their technology seemed simple. But maybe their technology is simple because they made it work better than ours. The tactical officer looked confused. I don't understand. Look at their railguns, Sixthor pointed at the display. We abandoned kinetic weapons centuries ago because we thought energy weapons were superior. But the humans made railguns that fire faster and hit harder than our plasma cannons. They took an old technology and perfected it. He changed the display to show the human shield systems. And their shields. They're not more advanced than ours. They're just designed better. Every bit of energy is used efficiently. No waste, no weak points. So they're not ahead of us in technology, the tactical officer said. They're just better at using what they have. Exactly. And that might be even more frightening. A message came through from the Valorian High Command. They wanted Sixthor to escort Admiral Henderson and his senior officers to the homeworld. The Council wanted to thank Earth properly for saving their species. Sixthor sent confirmation and headed to the bridge. As he walked through the corridors, he saw his crew members celebrating. They were laughing and crying, hugging each other, unable to believe that the war was really over. After 3 years of constant fear and loss, they could finally go home. He reached the bridge and opened a channel to the UES Defiant. Admiral Henderson's face appeared on the screen. The human looked tired but satisfied. Admiral, the Council has requested that you and your officers visit our homeworld, Sixthor said. They wish to thank you personally. Henderson nodded. We'd be honored. Give us coordinates and we'll follow your lead. The fleet began moving toward Valorian Prime. As they traveled, Sixthor received reports from across the sector. The Krethik were in full retreat. All of their occupied territories were being abandoned as they pulled back to their own space. The mere presence of the human fleet had ended a war that had killed trillions. When they arrived at Valorian Prime, the planet was celebrating. Every city lit up with fireworks. Broadcasts played footage of the battle on every screen. Children wore makeshift human costumes. It was like a festival, but with an edge of hysteria. People who had thought they would die were suddenly alive and safe. Henderson and his senior officers took a shuttle down to the surface. Sixthor met them at the landing pad. This was the first time he had seen humans in person, and he was struck by how ordinary they looked. Small creatures, barely reaching his shoulder, with soft skin and vulnerable bodies. But when he looked into Admiral Henderson's eyes, Sixthor saw something that made him understand. These were the eyes of a predator, a hunter who had spent his entire life preparing for war. And behind Henderson stood officers with the same look. Captain Lauren Price, Commander Jake Morrison, Captain Marcus Flynn. All of them carried themselves like warriors who knew exactly how dangerous they were. Welcome to Valorian Prime, Sixthor said. Bowing in the Valorian way, Henderson returned the gesture. Though his bow was different, more like a nod. Thank you for inviting us. Your planet is beautiful. They were escorted to the council chambers where High Counselor Vexenor and the other council members waited. The room fell silent as the humans entered. Every Valorian present stared at these strange creatures who had saved them all. Vexenor stood slowly. He looked even older than before, but there was light in his eyes that hadn't been there during the war. Admiral Henderson, he began, I do not have words adequate to express our gratitude. You came when no one else would. You fought when victory seemed impossible. You saved our entire species from extinction. Henderson shifted uncomfortably. Sixthor noticed that the human didn't seem to enjoy formal speeches. We only did what was right, High Counselor. The Valorians helped us when we were new to space. We couldn't abandon you in your time of need. Nevertheless, you have our eternal gratitude, Vexenor said. We will never forget what Earth did for us today. The Council presented Henderson with a medal made from rare crystal found only on Valorian Prime. Then they asked questions. So many questions. How did human weapons work? What tactics did they use? How did they coordinate so perfectly? Could they teach others? Captain Price explained the combat drones. Commander Morrison demonstrated some basic electronic warfare principles. Captain Flynn discussed the kinetic mass driver in careful, technical terms that made it clear he wasn't giving away all the secrets. But the most interesting conversation happened when Counselor Vexnor asked about human military. Philosophy, Admiral, he said carefully. We've studied the battle recordings extensively. Your tactics are unlike anything we've seen before. Most species fight with honor, following traditional patterns. But you seemed focused only on winning, on destroying the enemy as quickly as possible. Henderson was quiet for a moment. With respect, Counselor, we don't see the point of fighting with honor if it means losing. On Earth, we spent thousands of years fighting wars. We learned that war isn't about glory or tradition. It's about survival. The side that wants to survive more, that's willing to use every advantage they have, that's the side that wins. But doesn't that make war terrible? Another counselor asked. War is already terrible, Henderson replied. Making it efficient just saves lives in the long run. Every minute we spent fighting the Krethic was a minute where someone might die. So we ended it as fast as we could. The counselors absorbed this. It was a perspective none of them had considered before. They had always seen war as something that followed rules, something that could be civilized. The humans saw it as a problem to be solved as quickly and efficiently as possible. Lieutenant Beth Connor, one of the science officers from the Defiant, spoke up. If I may, High Counselor, we'd like to help you rebuild. We have construction technology and resources we can share. That's very generous, Vexnor said. It's practical, Henderson corrected. A strong Valorian coalition is good for everyone. Plus, we might learn from your technology too. Just because we won this battle doesn't mean we know everything. Over the next few days, human ships spread throughout Valorian space, helping with reconstruction. They brought supplies, medical equipment, and expertise. Weapons Officer Nathan Cross worked with Valorian engineers to improve their shield systems. Lieutenant Lisa Martinez, the fleet's strategic advisor, began teaching Valorian officers about human tactical doctrine. The news of the battle spread throughout the galaxy quickly. Other species heard about how 50 human ships had destroyed 70 Krethic vessels in minutes. Ambassadors started arriving on Earth, all wanting to meet this new power. The Krethic Dominion recalled all of their expansion fleets. They sealed their borders and refused contact with other species. Inside their space, their leadership was in chaos. They had always believed they were the strongest warriors in the galaxy. The humans had shattered that belief in 4 minutes. On the UES Defiant, Admiral Henderson was preparing to return to Earth. He stood on the bridge one last time, looking at Valorian Prime through the viewing screen. Katie Warren approached him with a report. Admiral, I've been analyzing our combat performance, she said. Our weapons performed at 98% effectiveness. Our shields exceeded expectations, and our tactical AI systems worked perfectly. Good, Henderson said. Make sure all of that data gets sent to command. They'll want to study it. There's something else, sir. I've been monitoring galactic communications. Every species is talking about us. Some are impressed. Some are frightened, but they're all paying attention now. Henderson nodded. He had expected this. Humanity had just announced itself to the galaxy in the most dramatic way possible. How many species are requesting meetings with Earth? At last count, 37. And that number is growing. The return to Earth was different from the departure. When the fleet had left, they were heading into the unknown, uncertain if they would return at all. Now they came home as heroes, as the force that had saved an entire species and proven humanity's worth to the galaxy. Admiral Henderson stood on the bridge of the Defiant as Earth came into view. The blue planet looked exactly the same as when they had left, but everything else had changed. Messages from the President, the Joint Chiefs, and dozens of ambassadors from other species flooded the communication systems. Everyone wanted to talk to the fleet that had won the impossible victory. Admiral, Katie Warren said, we're receiving approach clearance. Earth Defense Command wants us to enter a parade formation. Henderson smiled. A parade. I suppose we've earned it. The fleet arranged itself in perfect formation and began its descent through Earth's atmosphere. Below, millions of people had gathered to watch. News helicopters filled the sky. Every screen on the planet showed the same image. 50 warships returning home without a single casualty. After the ships landed, Henderson and his officers were taken directly to the White House. President Brandon Hayes greeted them personally, shaking hands with each crew member who had made the journey. The president looked pleased, but Henderson could see the weight of new responsibilities in his eyes. Admiral, Hayes said quietly as they walked to the Situation Room. You've changed everything. The galaxy is watching us now. We need to be ready for what comes next. I understand, Mr. President. The Situation Room was filled with people, military leadership, scientists, diplomats, and representatives from every branch of government. General Linda Shaw was there along with the Joint Chiefs. They all stood when Henderson entered. Please sit, Hayes said. We have a lot to discuss. For the next 6 hours, they reviewed everything. The battle tactics, the weapons performance, the diplomatic implications. Scientists wanted to study the combat data. Diplomats wanted to know about potential alliances. Military leaders wanted to understand what threats might still be out there. Captain Marcus Flynn presented his analysis of the kinetic mass driver. The weapon performed better than expected. However, I recommend we develop countermeasures in case other species try to copy the technology. Commander Jake Morrison discussed electronic warfare. The Krethic had no defense against our hacking systems. But now that we've shown what we can do, other species will develop protections. We need to stay ahead. Captain Lauren Price talked about the combat drones. The autonomous systems worked perfectly in this battle, but we should consider upgrading their decision-making capabilities for more complex scenarios. President Hayes listened carefully to everything. When the presentations finished, he leaned forward. What's the bottom line? Are we safe? Henderson answered. For now, yes. The Krethic won't attack anyone for years. They're too busy dealing with internal problems. But there are other threats out there. The galaxy is a dangerous place, and we've just painted a target on ourselves by showing how powerful we are. Then we need to be ready, Hayes said. I'm authorizing funding for 100 new warships. I want our fleet expanded and our defenses strengthened. Admiral Henderson, I'm promoting you to Supreme Commander of all Earth Space Forces. You'll oversee this expansion. Henderson hadn't expected that. Mr. President, I'm honored, but are you sure? There are other qualified officers. You won the first major space battle in human history without losing a single person, Hayes said. You proved that our tactics work, that our technology is superior, that humanity belongs among the stars. If anyone should lead our forces, it's you. Henderson accepted with a salute. Around the room, other officers received new assignments. Captain Flynn would oversee the construction of a new class of dreadnoughts. Captain Price would establish a fighter wing academy. Commander Morrison would head the new electronic warfare division, but the military changes were only the beginning. Over the next few weeks, Earth's relationship with the rest of the galaxy transformed completely. The Galactic Council sent a delegation to Earth. They arrived on a massive ship that made even the largest human vessels look small. The delegation included representatives from 20 species, all wanting to meet with Earth's leadership. The head of the delegation was Ambassador Kelvar, a tall being with silver skin and 4 arms. He had been a member of the Council for 40 years and had seen dozens of species join the galactic community. None of them had ever made an entrance like humanity. Henderson was present when Ambassador Kelvar met with President Hayes. The meeting took place in the newly constructed Galactic Affairs Building in New York City. President Hayes, Kelvar began. The Council has reviewed Earth's actions in the Epsilon sector. Your military response was extraordinary. In recognition of this, the Council is offering Earth full membership status and a permanent seat on the Security Council. Hayes glanced at Henderson before responding. We're honored by this offer, but I want to be clear about something. Earth didn't help the Valorians to gain status or power. We did it because it was the right thing to do. We understand, Kelvar said, but whether you sought it or not, Earth has become a major galactic power. Your actions have consequences beyond your intentions. What kind of consequences? Henderson asked. Kelvar brought up a holographic display showing the galaxy. Large portions were marked in different colors, representing various powers and alliances. Before your intervention, the galactic order was stable but fragile. The Krethic were expanding but slowly. Other aggressive species were watching, waiting to see if they could expand too. Your victory changed everything. He pointed to the Krethic territory, which had shrunk significantly. The Krethic are no longer seen as unstoppable. This has emboldened some species but frightened others. Many are now asking themselves, if the humans could defeat the Krethic so easily, what else could they do? Are they afraid of us? Hayes asked. Some are. Others see opportunity for alliance. And a few see potential threats that need to be eliminated before you become too powerful. Kelvar looked at them seriously. You need to understand, President Hayes. Earth has entered galactic politics at the highest level. Every decision you make now affects billions of lives across hundreds of worlds. Henderson felt the weight of those words. They had gone from being newcomers barely worthy of notice to major players in galactic affairs. It had happened so fast in just a few weeks. What does the Council recommend? Hayes asked. Build alliances. Share technology carefully. Demonstrate that Earth's power will be used responsibly, and prepare for challenges because they will come. Over the following months, Earth followed that advice. Diplomatic missions were sent to dozens of worlds. Trade agreements were signed. Research partnerships were established. Lieutenant Lisa Martinez traveled to allied species, teaching them about human military tactics while learning from their own experiences. The Valorian coalition became Earth's closest ally. Commander Zixthor visited Earth multiple times, helping to establish joint training programs between Valorian and human forces. The two species had formed a bond through their shared experience, and both benefited from the partnership. But not everyone was happy about Earth's rise. 3 species who had been competitors with the Valorians saw humanity as a threat. They formed a coalition of their own, quietly building up their military forces. Intelligence reports suggested they were developing weapons designed specifically to counter human technology. Henderson briefed President Hayes on these developments. We're seeing increased military activity in the outer sectors. Nothing aggressive yet, but they're preparing for something. Another war? Hayes asked. Possibly. Or they might just be trying to ensure we can't do to them what we did to the Krethic. Can we prevent conflict? Henderson thought carefully. The best way to prevent war is to make sure everyone knows the cost would be too high. We need to continue building our strength, but we also need to show that we're not looking for fights. A balance between power and restraint, Hayes said. Exactly. Earth continued to grow its military. New shipyards were built in orbit around Mars and the Moon. The 100 new warships that Hayes had authorized were under construction, along with improved versions of existing designs. Danny Cole led a team of engineers developing the next generation of shield technology, incorporating lessons learned from studying Krethic systems. Katie Warren established a tactical academy where officers from Earth and allied species could train together. The curriculum included everything from basic space combat to advanced strategic planning. Students learned human tactics, but also how other species approached warfare. Captain Flynn's new Dreadnought class was nearly complete. The UES Warrior would be twice the size of the Retribution, with weapons powerful enough to destroy small moons. It represented everything humanity had learned from their first real space battle. On Earth itself, life had changed. People looked at the stars differently now. They knew that humanity wasn't alone, that there were threats out there, but also that Earth had proven it could defend itself and its allies. Recruitment for the Space Forces reached levels never seen before. Young people dreamed of serving on ships like the Defiant or Retribution. 1 year after the Battle of Epsilon Sector, a memorial was built in